I remember that morning like it was etched into my memory with acid. 8 years at TechVision. 8 years of canceled dinner plans, of working weekends, of taking international calls at 3 a.m. because that's what team players do. 8 years of exceeding every target they set for me. I was sitting at my desk, that familiar oak veneer I'd come to know better than my own dining table at home. The office in Charlotte was still quiet. Most people hadn't arrived yet. My coffee was still too hot to drink when the email arrived. Subject line: Q3 Leadership Advancement Announcements. I clicked the email, scanned the list of names once, twice, 3 times. My name wasn't there. Jason Miller's was, though. Jason, who'd joined the company 4 years after me. Jason, whose quarterly numbers were consistently lower than mine. Jason, whose uncle played golf with our CEO every second Sunday. To continue listening to this beautiful and special story, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Write your name and the city you're watching from so I can include a special greeting for you in my next story. It was Rachel from HR who finally approached me, 3 days later. "Daniel," she said, with that careful, neutral tone they must teach in HR training courses. "Do you have a moment to chat?" We sat in one of those small conference rooms, with the frosted glass wall. "I understand you might have questions about the leadership announcements," she began. "Just one, actually," I said, surprised by how level my voice sounded. "Why?" Rachel's smile never reached her eyes. "These decisions are complex, Daniel. Many factors are considered, such as team dynamics, strategic vision alignment, future potential." She recited the phrases like she was reading from an invisible handbook. The committee felt that at this time, Jason was the better fit for the director position. I nodded slowly. "That's interesting, because my last 3 performance reviews rate me as exceeding expectations in all those areas." Rachel's smile tightened. "We don't doubt your performance, Daniel. Sometimes these decisions come down to intangibles." Intangibles. A nice corporate word for nepotism. I wish I could say I'd started keeping records because I had some premonition of betrayal. The truth is more mundane. I'm thorough. Always have. When I was put in charge of the Nexus project last year, a $40 million integration of our platform with a major client's systems, I documented everything, every decision, every meeting, every change to the project scope. What wasn't second nature was downloading the system logs. That started 3 months ago, when I noticed something odd. I was working late finalizing a presentation, when I noticed a file had been moved. Nothing dramatic, just a budget proposal I'd worked on that was suddenly in a different folder. A restricted folder I couldn't access. Curious, I checked the activity log. The file had been moved by Tom Wallace, my director, at 10:42 p.m. the previous night. Why would Tom be moving my files after hours? And why to a folder I couldn't access? That small moment of confusion was the thread that, when pulled, began to unravel everything. The next day, more of my files had been moved. Documents outlining my strategic vision for the department's growth. Proposals I'd drafted for new initiatives. I started keeping records. I set up a system to automatically save copies of the access logs to our department's shared drives. I documented file movements. I saved emails, all just as a precaution. What was happening became clear a week after the promotion announcement. 3 weeks before the announcement, there had been a flurry of activity. Tom had been accessing my files, my proposals, my strategic plans, and within hours, new documents would appear in Jason's personal drive, with almost identical titles. My quarterly analysis of market opportunities, with my name erased and Jason's added. My proposal for restructuring the customer success team, with a few sentences reworded. My 3-year vision for department growth, copied almost verbatim. The cold feeling in my chest crystallized into something hard and sharp. This wasn't just unfairness. This was theft. This was fraud. I stayed at the office until 2 a.m. that night, methodically documenting everything. I created a timeline of file access and creation. I saved side-by-side comparisons, showing the original documents and the plagiarized versions. By the time I drove home in the dark, the empty Charlotte streets reflecting the glow of streetlights, I had a complete audit trail. Every log entry, every document version, every piece of evidence showing exactly what had happened. Tom had systematically taken my work and passed it off as Jason's, and then used that stolen work as justification for promoting Jason instead of me. People think making big decisions feels dramatic, like in movies, where there's that moment of clarity, usually accompanied by swelling music and a determined look. Reality is messier. For the next 2 days, I went about my work as if nothing had changed. I attended meetings, answered emails, made small talk in the break room about the Panthers' chances this season. I smiled at Tom when I passed him in the hallway. I congratulated Jason on his promotion, shaking his hand firmly, looking him in the eye. "Thanks, man," he said, having the decency to at least look slightly uncomfortable. "I know you were in the running too." "Best person for the job," I replied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. At night, I'd sit on my balcony in Myers Park, nursing a glass of bourbon, and think about consequences. If I sent those logs to the board, there would be no going back. Best case scenario, an investigation, uncomfortable questions, Tom and Jason facing repercussions. Worst case, I'd be labeled a troublemaker, blackballed in the industry, maybe even facing legal action for accessing and storing system logs. On the second night, my phone rang. It was my sister Kate calling from Boston. "Hey, big brother," she said, her voice familiar and comforting. "Just checking in. You've been quiet lately." I hadn't told her about the promotion situation yet. Kate knows me better than anyone. "Something's wrong," she said after a few minutes of small talk. "Tell me." So I did. Not the technical details about system logs and file access, but the betrayal, the theft, the injustice. Kate listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Remember when you were 10, she finally said, "and Mrs. Abernathy accused you of cheating on that math test?" I did remember. Miss Abernathy had been convinced I'd copied from Sarah Chen because our answers were similar. "You could have just taken the detention," Kate continued. "It would have been easier, but you did. You gathered all your scratch paper, showed all your work, and refused to back down until she admitted she was wrong." I smiled at the memory. "Dad said I was too stubborn for my own good." "Dad was proud of you," Kate said firmly. "So was I, because you knew the truth mattered." By the time I went to bed, my decision was made. Morning light filtered through my blinds as I sat at my desk at home. It was 6:45 a.m. I'd been up since 4:30, meticulously organizing the evidence. I created a single PDF document with a clear timeline, highlighted the key discrepancies, and attached all the supporting logs and file comparisons. I opened my email and entered the addresses: the 7 board members and CEO Richard Harmon. I typed no subject line, no greeting, no explanatory text in the body of the email, just the PDF attachment: Tech Vision Audit Trail Full Documentation.ef. My cursor hovered over the send button. Once I clicked it, there was no taking it back. I'd be exposing not just Tom and Jason, but systemic problems in how our company operates. I'd be challenging powerful people who didn't like to be challenged. I thought about the 8 years I'd given to Tech Vision, the late nights, the missed birthdays and holidays, the relationships that had withered because I was always just finishing something up at work. My finger clicked the mouse. Sent. 7:13 a.m. I sat back, feeling strangely calm. Whatever happened next, I had stood up for what was right. I had refused to let the lie stand unchallenged. I showered, dressed, and drove to the office as if it were any normal day. I settled at my desk at 8:30, right on time. People were filtering in, carrying coffee cups, chatting about weekend plans. Nobody looked at me differently. Nobody knew yet. At 9:17, my phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. Conference room E, 9:30. Richard Harmon, the CEO. The email had been sent less than 2 hours ago, and it had already reached the top. Richard Harmon was alone in the room when I entered. He was a tall man with steel gray hair, and the kind of tan that comes from weekends on a yacht, not at a desk. He didn't stand when I entered, just gestured to a chair across from him. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, his voice neither friendly nor hostile. "I received an interesting email this morning." I nodded but said nothing. "No explanation," he continued. "No context, just documentation." He tapped a printed copy of my PDF on the table between us. "Very thorough documentation. The evidence speaks for itself, sir, I said. Harmon studied me for a long moment. Do you know what most people would have done in your situation, Mr. Whitmore? Complained to, filed a formal grievance, or most likely, just accepted it and moved on. He nodded slowly. Yet you chose to send this directly to the board. To me. Why? It was the question I'd been asking myself for days. The answer came with surprising clarity. Because this isn't just about a promotion, Mr. Harmon. It's about integrity. It's about the kind of company TechVision claims to be versus what it actually is. I met his gaze steadily. And because some things matter more than career advance, Victoria Chen didn't waste time with pleasantries. Mr. Whitmore, she said, taking a seat directly across from me, I want to thank you for bringing this to our attention. Her voice was precise, each word carefully placed like stones in a path. This is exactly the kind of situation our whistleblower protocols are designed for. I blinked in surprise. Whistleblower protocols. I hadn't even known TechVision had such a thing. The man in the suit introduced himself as Lawrence Mercer, head of internal audit. He had the careful, measured demeanor of someone who spends his days looking for discrepancies and spreadsheets. We've begun a preliminary review of the evidence you provided, Mercer said. If what we're seeing is accurate, and we have no reason to believe it isn't, this represents a serious breach of company policy and ethics. I'd prepared myself for dismissal, for accusations, for anger. I hadn't prepared for this apparent validation. I don't understand, I said finally. I expected to be escorted out of the building. Victoria Chen's expression softened slightly. Daniel, may I ask why you didn't include any personal statement with your email? Any demands or complaints? I considered the question. The facts should stand on their own. My feelings about them are irrelevant. Harmon exchanged a glance with Chen. That's unusual, he said. Most people in your position would have made demands, threatened to go public, used it as leverage. I'm not most people, I said simply. A small smile appeared on Victoria Chen's face. No, you're not, and that's precisely why we're having this conversation instead of the one you expected. Over the next hour, they explained the situation from their perspective. The board had been concerned about the leadership culture at TechVision for some time. There had been rumors of favoritism, of decision-making happening in private clubs and on golf courses, rather than based on performance metrics. But rumors aren't evidence. What you sent us, Mercer said, is the first concrete documentation we've seen of these practices. It's exactly what we needed to take action. We've been looking for someone like you, Daniel. Chen added. Someone with the technical skills to document the problem and the moral courage to bring it forward. I sat back, trying to process what I was hearing. So, I'm not being fired? Harmon actually laughed at that. Fired? No. But we are going to ask something significant of you. They wanted me to help with the investigation, to work directly with Mercer's team, using my knowledge of the systems and the organization to uncover the full extent of the problem. This wasn't just about Tom and Jason anymore. They suspected this was happening in other departments, a symptom of a deeper cultural issue at TechVision. We need to clean house, Chen said bluntly. But to do that, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with. Have you ever tried to act normal when everything has changed? It's exhausting. Every casual conversation becomes a performance. Every email requires double-checking for tone and content. Every meeting is an exercise in maintaining a facade. For the next 3 weeks, that was my life. By day, I was still Daniel Whitmore, reliable team manager diligently working on my projects, politely engaging with colleagues, nodding along in meetings. I brought donuts on Fridays. I joined the fantasy football league. I asked about people's weekends and remembered their children's names. But in the early mornings, late evenings, and behind the closed doors of unmarked conference rooms, I was something else entirely, an investigator working directly with the board to document systemic corruption within the company. Lawrence Mercer and his team had set up a secure communication channel outside the company's normal systems. We used encrypted messaging and met in coffee shops around Charlotte rather than corporate meeting rooms when possible. The evidence was mounting quickly. What Tom had done wasn't isolated. It was part of a pattern that stretched across multiple departments and went back years. The most difficult part was maintaining my relationship with Tom. He'd been avoiding me since the promotion announcement. But now he seemed to be making a deliberate effort to manage me. Suddenly I was invited to meetings I'd previously been excluded from. He started asking for my input on strategic decisions. He even suggested I might be in line for the next round of promotions if I kept up the good work. It was obvious what was happening. Damage control. Whether he suspected I knew about the stolen work or was just trying to keep a valuable employee from leaving, he was working hard to appease me. I played along. I expressed appropriate gratitude for the new opportunities. I worked diligently on the additional projects he assigned. I never once let on that I knew the truth. The moral gymnastics of it all kept me awake at night. Was I any better than Tom, smiling to his face while documenting his misconduct behind his back? Was this investigation really about justice, or had it become about revenge? The breaking point came during a department meeting in week 3 of the investigation. Tom was presenting our quarterly results, using slides I'd created but with my name removed. Standard practice by now, but something I'd learned to accept with a polite smile. Then he got to the Nexus project. My project, the one I'd led from concept to successful implementation. The one that had saved the client millions and cemented our relationship with them for years to come. Under Jason's leadership, Tom said, clicking to a slide showing the project's impressive metrics, the Nexus integration has exceeded all expectations. Jason, sitting near the front of the room, had the grace to look uncomfortable. He shifted in his seat, avoiding eye contact with anyone. But Tom continued, elaborating on how Jason's innovative approach and strategic vision had made the project a success. Each word was a knife, twisting deeper. That evening, I met with Mercer in a quiet bar in Noda, far from the office and unlikely to be frequented by TechVision employees. We need to accelerate the timeline, I told him, sliding a flash drive across the table. This has everything we've gathered so far, plus new documentation from today's meeting. Mercer pocketed the drive. The board is meeting next week. We were planning to present preliminary findings then. Make them final findings, I said. I can't do this anymore. It's not sustainable. He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. You've done more than enough, Daniel. We can take it from here. Board meetings at TechVision were normally quiet affairs, held in the top floor conference room with its sweeping views of the Charlotte skyline. This one was different. I wasn't in the room, of course. My role in the investigation was still confidential, but I could see the effects rippling through the office, like a stone dropped in still water. It started with Tom being called upstairs at night. He walked past my desk with his usual confident stride, straightening his tie, offering a quick nod as he passed. Budget review with the board, he explained with a casual shrug. Shouldn't be more than an hour. He didn't return. At 10:30 Jason was summoned. He looked nervous, adjusting his cuffs repeatedly, glancing around as if seeking reassurance. No one offered any. He'd been less popular since his promotion, his former peers now treating him with the careful deference reserved for someone who'd risen too quickly. He didn't return either. By noon the rumors had started. Administrative assistants from the executive floor, always the first to know anything important, were huddled in small groups, voices low, expressions serious. Security personnel were visible in unusual numbers, positioned near elevators and stairwells. At 1:45 my phone buzzed with a message from Mercer. Conference room E, the same room where this had all started 3 weeks ago. I felt a strange symmetry to it as I rode the elevator up, watching the floor numbers climb. Victoria Chen was waiting for me, along with Mercer and Richard Harmon. Their expressions were grave but not unfriendly. It's done, Chen said without preamble. The board voted unanimously. Tom Wallace has been terminated for cause, effective immediately. Jason Miller has been placed on administrative leave pending further review. I nodded, absorbing the information. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt oddly hollow. There's more, Harmon added. 3 other department heads have been suspended. We've identified patterns similar to what you documented across multiple divisions. The investigation is expanding, Mercer explained. What you started has opened a much larger can of worms than anyone anticipated. I thought about my colleagues in those other departments, wondering if they'd experienced the same betrayal I had, wondering if they'd had the means to document it as I had. What happens now? I asked. Victoria Chen leaned forward, Now we begin the real work, rebuilding the leadership, changing the culture, creating systems that prevent this from happening again. She paused. We'd like you to be part of that process. Corporate restructuring is never clean or simple. The removal of Tom and Jason created a vacuum, and nature, especially corporate nature, abhors a vacuum. In the weeks that followed the board meeting, TechVision entered a state of controlled chaos. Interim leaders were appointed, teams were reshuffled, projects were reprioritized, everyone was watching everyone else, wondering who would rise and who would fall in the new order. My role on the transition team meant I was now straddling two worlds, still managing my department, while also helping shape the company's future direction. The days were long, the meetings endless, the decisions consequential. It was during one of these meetings, 3 weeks after Tom's departure, that I learned something that changed my understanding of everything that had happened. We were reviewing personnel files, looking for employees whose careers might have been artificially stalled by the previous leadership. Victoria Chen had insisted on this, not just moving forward with new policies, but trying to identify and rectify past injustices where possible. Daniel, Mercer said, sliding a folder across the table to me. You might want to look at this one specifically. It was my own personnel file, not the version I had access to in the HR system, but the complete file including confidential notes and evaluations. I opened it with a strange sense of detachment, as if reading about someone else. My performance reviews were there, consistently excellent as I'd known. Project assessments, all positive. Feedback from clients, uniformly enthusiastic. Then I came to a section labeled Advancement Considerations. It contained notes from leadership discussions about promotion possibilities going back several years. From 3 years ago, Whitmore demonstrates exceptional technical and leadership capabilities. Recommend for director track. From 2 years ago, Whitmore continues to exceed all performance metrics. Strong candidate for next director opening. From last year, Whitmore ready for advancement. Hold for strategic considerations. And then, from 2 months before the promotion announcement that had started all of this, Whitmore advancement, approval rescinded per T. Wallace request. Redirect to Miller, J. But it was the note attached to this last entry that made my blood run cold. A comment from the former head of HR, who had since retired. Wallace cites concerns about Whitmore's personal life as factor. No documentation provided to support concerns. My personal life? What concerns could there possibly be? I looked up at Mercer, who was watching me carefully. Do you know what this means? I asked. He nodded slowly. We found similar notes in other files. It was a tactic Wallace used when he wanted to block someone's advancement, but didn't have a legitimate reason. Vague concerns that were never documented or substantiated. But what concerns could he possibly have had about my personal life? I asked, genuinely confused. I'm boring. I work. I go home. I watch documentaries about space. Mercer hesitated, glancing at the door as if to make sure it was closed. We believe, he said carefully, that Wallace used these concerns as code for certain biases. Biases, I repeated. You mean discrimination? Yes, though always carefully disguised, never explicit enough to trigger legal concern. 6 months after sending that email to the board, TechVision was a different company. Not perfect, no organization ever is, but fundamentally changed in ways both visible and invisible. The most obvious changes were structural. New leadership in multiple departments, transparent promotion criteria, publicly posted and regularly reviewed, a formal system for documenting contributions to projects, ensuring credit went where it was due. The mentorship program I'd advocated for, now thriving with over 100 participants. The less visible changes were cultural. The way people communicated more openly about their work. The increased collaboration across teams. The willingness to challenge ideas regardless of who proposed them. The sense that merit actually mattered now. My own role had evolved as well. I was still managing my team, but I'd also become something of an internal consultant on organizational ethics and transparency initiatives. It wasn't a formal title, but people throughout the company sought my input when difficult questions arose about fairness or attribution, which made the email that arrived that morning all the more surprising. Subject: confidential, meeting request from Richard Harmon. CEO: Daniel, I'd appreciate your time for a private discussion regarding an opportunity. Today, 4:01 p.m., my office. Please keep this confidential for now. I stared at the message, reading it again and again, as if additional words might appear. An opportunity. What kind of opportunity required confidentiality and a private meeting with the CEO? Harmon's office was on the top floor, a corner space with windows on two sides, offering panoramic views of Charlotte. It was furnished simply but elegantly, no ostentatious displays of power, just quality furniture and a few carefully chosen art pieces. He greeted me warmly, gesturing to a sitting area rather than the more formal conference table. Victoria Chen was already there, along with a woman I didn't recognize. Daniel, Harmon said after we were all seated, I'd like you to meet Eleanor Voss, the CEO of Meridian Technology. I shook her hand, surprised. Meridian was one of our biggest competitors, a company similar in size and scope to TechVision, but based in Atlanta. Ms. Voss approached us with an unusual proposal. Harmon continued, one that directly involves you. Eleanor Voss leaned forward, her gaze direct and assessing. Mr. Whitmore, I've been following the changes at TechVision with great interest. The mentorship program you've implemented, in particular, has caught my attention. I nodded, uncertain where this was going. It's been successful beyond our expectations. I believe similar changes are needed at Meridian, she said bluntly, and I'd like you to lead them. For a moment I thought I'd misheard. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a challenge, she corrected, to do for Meridian what you've done here. With the title of Chief Ethics Officer and a seat on our executive team. I glanced at Harmon and Chen, trying to gauge their reactions. They both looked completely calm, as if this turn of events wasn't surprising to them. You know about this? I asked them. Harmon nodded. Eleanor called me last week. She was direct about her intentions. And you're okay with it? With a competitor recruiting one of your employees? Victoria Chen smiled slightly. We don't own you, Daniel. And what you've helped build here is bigger than any one person now. It will continue without you. By Monday morning, I had my answer, not from any new information or insight, but from finally acknowledging what I'd known all along. I called Eleanor Voss first, then went upstairs to speak with Harmon and Chen. At 4:01, I gathered my team in our department conference room. They looked curious, perhaps sensing that something significant was happening. I have an announcement to make. I've been offered a position at Meridian Technologies, Chief Ethics Officer, with a seat on their executive team. I saw the surprise on their faces, followed quickly by concern. They'd been through so much change already. The prospect of losing their manager now was clearly unsettling. I've also been offered a new role here at TechVision, I continued, Chief Integrity Officer, reporting directly to the board. Now they looked confused, unsure where this was going. After careful consideration, I've decided to stay at TechVision. The relief in the room was palpable. Alicia, my senior analyst, smiled, nodding as if she'd expected this all along. But I added, there's a condition to my acceptance. The mentorship program we've developed will be expanded to include an exchange component with Meridian Technology. We'll share best practices, challenges, and solutions with their team as they implement similar changes. I went on to outline the details of the arrangement that Harmon, Chen, and Voss had agreed to that afternoon. A formal partnership between the companies focused specifically on ethical leadership practices, regular exchanges of information and personnel, joint development of training programs and monitoring systems. It's unprecedented, I acknowledged. Competitors don't typically collaborate like this, but both companies recognize that this issue transcends normal business rivalries. Creating ethical, transparent corporate cultures benefits everyone: employees, customers, shareholders. As I spoke, I could see the team processing the implications. This wasn't just about my career decision. It was about the potential for the work we'd done here to have impact far beyond our walls. Later that evening, as the office emptied and the sky darkened outside my window, I sat at my desk reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. 8 years ago, I joined TechVision believing in meritocracy, in fairness, in doing things the right way. I'd been naive, perhaps, but that idealism had served a purpose. It had made the betrayal more painful when it came, but it had also fueled my determination to expose the truth and create change. 6 months ago, I'd sent an email at 7:13 a.m. that had changed everything for me for Tech Vision, and now potentially for an entire industry. An email with no words, just evidence. An email sent without expectation of personal gain, motivated solely by the belief that the truth mattered. As I packed up to leave, I noticed the framed mission statement on my wall, the corporate one that had been there since I moved into this office. The words had always seemed hollow to me, corporate speak without substance. Tomorrow, I decided, I would replace it with something else, something that reflected what I'd learned, what we'd built, what we were still working toward. Not a mission statement, but a simple reminder. The truth matters. How we treat people matters, and one person, acting with conviction, can change systems that seem immovable. I'd lost my faith in the system, but I'd found something much more valuable. The knowledge that systems can be rebuilt, that cultures can change, that ethics can matter in corporate America, and that was worth far more than any promotion I'd ever been denied.